Hello, everyone. This is Laura, and this is Stuff I Find Interesting, episode 21. Kind of crazy, right? And I'm here to bring you some interesting stuff. And the vibe I'm going for is you're taking a long bus ride or train ride. Train ride's better for like an hour. And some random person sits next to you and just starts talking all kinds of stuff theories, pictures on the phone, you know, just a smattering of topics, if you will. And when you walk off the bus, you're sort of, or train, you're sort of dizzy, like, oh wow, that was really kind of intense, and maybe it kind of causes you to think a different way about stuff, or see things in a new way, or learn something new, which is something I try to do every single day. I try to learn something new. I try to learn lots of new things, but that's just kind of my personality. So I'm going to shrink this, and we are going to just talk real briefly about the Khanate of Kazan. So Kazan is that area where the Tartars kind of are, like, I wouldn't say allowed, but that's where they live, and they're kind of allowed to be there as a separate sort of entity. This is going to be included for you to read, but it really kind of goes into the noble families that were there and how that area kind of came together. So these people came from the steppes, meaning, like the Mongolian steppes. Part of the Golden Herd came down, and yeah, and they called themselves Tatars, and they have their own language, the Tatar language, including the middle dialect of the Kazan Tatars and the western dialect of the Mishars, which is written form of the old Tatar language. And then it goes into other languages. There's some history. But the thing I really wanted to show you is these are the costumes of people from Kazan, like the traditional costumes. So, if there was a Tartaria, what did people wear? Does anybody know the answer to that question? So this will be in the links. It's a fun scroll. There's a whole other one that you can go through. This is the website of Hummus. I believe he is Russian. He doesn't really allow politics on his site, which I like. Seems like a nice guy. He has done an insane amount of work on his website, but does not like to be contacted. So, anyway. Now, one Russian city offers a glimpse of the country's increasingly Muslim and non-Slavic future. So there's the powerhouse cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg, but Russia's looking perhaps to add Kazan as the third sort of city. So there's sort of this trifecta, transcontinental, multi-ethnic country straddling both Europe and Asia. So that's the motivation, not really so much that but it's in a very strategic area, if you will. This goes into that. Fascinating. Some photos for you, early Chinese masters of photography. And when you scroll over the photos, they go back to black and white. They've been colored. Not all of them. I guess just the ones up top. Incredible pictures. There's little things written next to each picture, so you can go a little deeper and learn a little bit more. And that's that. Next, we're going to talk about Canaletto Plaza, the interior of the rotunda at Ranelagh. Ranelagh? Ranelagh. I have no idea. But this was a real thing that existed. People would go in it and walk around. I'll show you what it was part of. It was part of sort of this pleasure area where people would go to, I guess, kind of hang out, eat food, mingle. Oh man, doesn't this? Okay, there's no subtlety here with this thing. So in the middle, I'm not sure. I have to look into that. But see, we have bleachers, people talking. Maybe there was performances there. I don't know. Maybe it's a gazebo. Maybe it's a fireplace. Maybe it's a coffin. Why would it be a coffin? I don't know. You can look that up if you want. Anyway, that's part of the Ranelagh Gardens, which were they occupied the site of the Ranelagh House, which was built in 1688-89 by the first Earl of Ranelagh, an Anglo-Irish peer who was the treasurer of Chelsea Hospital. And this was right next to the hospital. And the centerpiece of Ranelagh was a Rococo rotunda, which figured prominently in views of Ranelagh Gardens taken from the river. It had a diameter of 120 feet and was designed by William Jones, a surveyor to the East India Company. The central support housed a chimney. Bam! There it is. There was also a Chinese pavilion. It was a place to go for music. And this is a picture of the whole thing. So there was more to it than just the rotunda. There was water and gazebos and I don't know. Fascinating, though. I was like, wow, that picture kind of blew me away. I found a site that has staircases, nothing but staircases. I got very excited. I wish you could, like, arrow over, though, and make it, like, look at it more. We're going to enlarge. Oh, you can't bigify. Denied. Now I've frozen up my computer. Great. Okay, we're going to get out of that. It's really cool spiral staircases, if you want to look at them. This is here for three reasons. Reason number one, it's called the strudel. I found that amusing. Reason number two, there is a house in the water with people on the roof. There's a cross up on top of this mountainous structure, or natural thingy. And then there's what looks like to be an old, this does look like it's a structure. It might not be. It might just be geology, but that's what it looks like. And we have these people that look like they're trying to row over to save them. So there's probably a story there. I thought that was interesting. Getting back to the World's Fair, this is one of the pavilions that everybody says was permanent. It was there, since the beginning of time in Tartaria. So I disagree with it because here it is disassembled. And if you look at pictures of it being built, which I did one night for like a lot of hours, it's the same thing. If it's the girders and, it could be argued, it's fake. I don't think so. That's not to say that there aren't buildings that are older than we are told. That I do not have an argument with. But the World's Fair, they were made to look permanent, mostly, I think. You could be wrong. This is the bathroom of an empress. And I would so love to sit in that tub and just sort of stare up at the ceiling. Cool stuff. The Ming Tombs, 1874. Just a really cool pic for you to look at. This is Ukraine's geopolitical history in 10 old maps. And this is really just for the collector or someone who's interested in it. There's some Tartarian stuff in there. But there's some of them are maps that I've not seen before. So someone who's into this kind of thing will really appreciate these maps. So I'm sharing it in the links. But I'm not really going to talk about it. Caligula, the barges of Lake Nemi. So it sank, and Mussolini knew about this pleasure ship that Caligula had built, this mythical ship, and he had the lake drained, and he had the ship excavated, and it turns out that it wasn't like myth that these pleasure ships were amazing and incredible. They actually really were amazing and incredible. Like, they were definitely pleasure ships. So I'm not sure if this one has some pictures. I think it does. There it is, all busted up at the bottom of the lake. That's an artifact that was recovered. This is part of what it looks like after it was excavated from the bottom of Lake Nemi, as directed by Mussolini. These are fragments of a mosaic floor, which is made out of marble. It had all of the best for everything, from top to bottom, art, just amazing stuff. This is the bronze roof tiles because it had a roof. And there are a bunch of pictures here that didn't show up, and I was very sad about that. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to put this into 22 so that I can go look some more and see if I can get some more of these pictures, because it's the artifacts, and that's probably that's the really exciting stuff. So the Nazis burned it, actually. That's how it ended up at the bottom of the lake. And an act of spite turned two invaluable historical artifacts to ashes. And it talks about the destruction. So this was his dream boat. He was emperor for only 4 years. I think most people know his name. He used to throw... He used to scatter money from rooftops. He used to dissolve priceless pearls in vinegar so he could drink them. That was considered to be some sort of longevity drink. He had a life-size statue of himself in gold placed in a temple that was dedicated to himself. The statue was dressed every day in clothes identical to those he wore. So whatever clothes he was wearing, the statue would wear for that day. But let's get back to the ship, because that's what we're talking about. So here's a picture of what it would have looked like. Roughly, it did have plants. This is reproduced from his, people that talked about the ship. Here it is in color, that same picture we looked at, and this talks about how the floating palace puts today's super yachts to shame. It's a good article. Now we're getting into conspiracy time, so this is kind of crazy. So I have a conspiracy, sort of. More metaphysical stuff, but it's personal. So this one night I go to sleep, and I have a very active dream life. And this particular night I had a dream that there was this man who was saying, come here, and he wanted me to follow him. And I was going through this sort of garden with all these statues. Sort of Romanesque stuff. This was about 15 years ago I had this dream, I think. Maybe longer. And so I follow him for a little bit. And I look down and I notice that I'm wearing a red dress. Like this big kind of red, like it's a really intense red dress. It's very extra. And I follow him, and then we come to this area where there's a pool, looking more decorative, though, than like you would jump into it. And then just beyond that, beyond the trees, there was an altar. And this guy wanted me to get on the altar and like lay down. And I was kind of freaked out, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And I say to him, like, who are you anyway? And I said it a bunch of times, and then I got really mad. And he said, Alistair Crowley. I didn't know who that was. I woke up, I wrote it in my little journal so that I could look at it at another time. A couple months later, I'm going through my dream journal for a chuckle because some of the stuff I was writing was really weird. And I come to the name Alistair Crowley, and I'm like, there's like Google now. I can like look this up in a second. And I Google the name, and imagine my surprise when stuff like this starts coming up. So he was into dark magic, Western esoteric and occult social and spiritual philosophy. It was a new religious movement founded in the 1900s by him. Adherents to Thelema are called Thelemites, I think. He wrote the Book of the Law, which was dictated to him by a potentially non-corporeal, by a ghost figure named Aiwas. This text was to serve as the foundation of the religious and philosophical system he called Thelema. So he thought he was a prophet, that he was going to usher in humanity's development, and it was polytheistic, and then he started to add in like some sexual stuff, which he probably threw in because he wanted to, you know. This is what he looked like in his older years, very intense, kind of creepy. And these are the places that he went where he practiced his particular brand of magic. Now, the thing I want to talk about that's interesting is one of the places that he was in Hyde Park, New York, and Esopus Island. Now, my grandparents, when they came from, my grandma, when she came from Sicily, lived in Esopus. So, I mean, I don't know, that's kind of random. And Hyde Park is about, 7 miles that way. Just interesting. And he reported having visions of his past lives during his stay on Esopus Island, blah, 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 blah. Now, also interestingly, and not really a conspiracy, but metaphysical kind of weirdness, my mom, who was completely insane, used to tell me all the time that we were in Egypt together and that she did me wrong, and that's why I was a horrible daughter. I wasn't a horrible daughter. So, I don't know. Then we have Aleister Crowley with the ancient Egypt stuff. There's a whole article about it. Totally random, right? Then there's Babylon, not to be confused with the town of Babylon. And she's also known as the Scarlet Woman. And also the whore of Babylon, who is referred to in the book of Revelation. He was a rock climber. He was actually kind of like good at it, which is very strange. So that's interesting. Okay, real conspiracy time. Tartary. We're coming back to Tartary. So the thing I'm trying to figure out now, because we keep coming back to this, is what exactly happened. Like, I need to know more about what happened before the 13th century. And I think there was just a loose collection of cultures and tribes, but who knows? There's a lot of ignorance about it. So Siberia was known as Great Tartary. The Crimean Khanate was known as Little Tartary. Manchuria was known as Chinese Tartary, and Western Central Asia was known as Independent Tartary. And that's where Kazan is. And then it talks about the lands and how then it began to be like sort of divided up. And it was known to European geographers. They started traveling around and saying, okay, there's more to this than that. So the great theory of Great Tartaria as a suppressed lost land or civilization originated in Russia, which is really interesting. Goes into mud flood, goes into the stuff we talked about. I think it's just sort of a good reminder. This really kind of goes into stuff a lot more deeply. So if you're really into this kind of thing, you will love this article. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to include it. It's fantastic. It makes for a very, very good read. But on the flip side of this particular article is this, which is called Historical Blindness. And it's also a podcast, so you can listen to it or you can read it. And this guy talks about Tartaria. And as you can guess by his name, Historical Blindness, he's talking about things that people are blind to, like conspiracies. And so he talks about it, blah, 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 what it is, just like, whatever. And it says, if you're still reading, I'll come clean. I don't actually believe this claptrap, but there is something very satisfying to me about the idea that some proponent of the Tartarian Empire conspiracy mythos might stumble upon or seek out this blog post and think at first that I'm promoting this nonsense when actually this is perhaps the most absurd pseudo-historical conspiracy delusion I've ever heard. It cannot be taken seriously, making it a perfect topic for my April Fool's episode. And then he feels like there's other reasons to address this, and he talks about its connection with QAnon. But the QAnon thing is it's almost like Nazi. Like Nazis had, like, the idea of the perfect person who was, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And the current day Nazis, they have a view of a world, that's perfect. Here's some more maps. And this guy also really goes into it. So you can read about what he thinks. And he backs up a lot of his stuff. Now, between those two articles, what do I think? Do I think there was a grand Tartary? I'm leaning towards, if there was, it was on the western part, in the western part, like maybe Crimean Tartary, if it started there at all, if that civilization existed at all. Because everything I'm seeing to the east has a very distinct look to it that is not Tartarian in nature. It's a whole different, it's Byzantine, it's Ottoman. So, what do we do with that information? Which is why I'm trying to find out more about the loose collection of tribes that were there, way back when, pre-Columbian, Neolithic, all that stuff. So he also talks about the reset. This is mud volcanoes at Gabustan. Remember we talked about this? That's crazy. I didn't even know this was in here. This is the guy, Anatoly Fomenko, who first started talking about Tartaria. There's a further theory that Tartaria is peopled by giants, which we talked about in the previous episode. So I would say read those if you want, or don't read them. I am done sharing for today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play some music, and I'm just going to scroll through some surreal paintings for about a minute, and then I'm going to bid you adieu.